Hey everyone, today we'll be working on a project from Naya Wolf's workbook, Winter Glow. We're working with an mauve size 6 round brush, and we're going to begin with burnt umber. We'll wet the burnt umber with a little bit of water and ensure that we've got a nice transparent tone. Blot the brush on paper towel, and we're going to begin to color in each individual brick. The beauty of this project is all the different tones in the bricks. So you want to make sure that as you're working, you've got some lighter, some darker, and that you don't try to just wash in the whole project. You go brick by brick to fill them in. Here you can see Naya allowing the color to pool in certain areas to give her more depth and dimension. And by rinsing the brush in water and continuing, she's going to get lighter pockets and darker pockets in each brick. This project is really kind of just fun and relaxing because you can get into the zone of painting bricks, and you don't necessarily have to do them all in burnt umber. You can switch to different earth tones like yellow ochre. You could add just a little touch of burnt sienna so you have some red bricks. But the main thing is to make sure that you vary the transparency using water to have some lighter and some darker bricks. In some cases here, she's blotting the brush on paper towel, which helps control how much water gets on the surface. And in others, she's just using the burnt umber and going straight onto the surface. And that's again going to vary the different colors that she's got there. When we do tutorials at Willow Wolf, we often film the entire thing in real time so that you can see and visualize every single stroke that we're adding step by step. If at any point you feel like skipping forward or pausing to take a little bit more time, please feel free to do so. But we're going to make sure that you can see as many different elements as possible. When Naya's painting the bricks, she's kind of outlining the brick first and then filling it in most occasions, but you could do it. You could start in the center and work over to each side, or you could start on one side and work over to the other. That will help you vary each individual one. And what's very important here is that she's leaving a little bit of white space around the bricks so that you can see the mortar between, and it almost acts as though it's a little bit of a highlight. In some cases, if you like just to add even deeper tones, you can put a touch of Payne's gray into the burnt umber just to give you even more variety in that kind of dark, rich color. Naya's working with a fairly limited palette here, so there's not actually a lot of colors in this project. And it's nice to be able to do that because it gives you the opportunity to learn how to ensure that you get good gradients from dark, medium, and light with just a few tones. So it's very monochromatic. It also helps ensure that that fire in the middle really sparkles and stands out in the composition because it's definitely the focal point and the center of interest. So keeping the bricks kind of more neutral helps the fire really sort of catch your eye. And for these longer sections, she's beginning on the left and gradually either rinsing and wiping the brush or just wiping the brush off to move that color to the right. And then you do the same thing on the opposite side. Begin on the far right, lift the brush off the surface as you stroke that color in towards the center, and then fill in the other areas that you want to fill in. This ensures that you leave some white space highlights in there. That technique where you lift the brush off the surface is called airplaning. So it's almost as though you're taking off or lifting off. Working wet in wet, we're just going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray plus Burnt Umber to shade some of those longer sections. This would probably be wood grain here as a mantle. So she's moving in a horizontal manner to kind of streak that color in, which almost acts as a bit of textured wood grain. Naya is picking up some fresh burnt umber and just continuing on underneath the mantle. And same process as above, piece by piece and brick by brick. She's going to continue to fill in the remainder of the fireplace. So this is something you can do at your own pace, just kind of relax and enjoy the process. We're just going to change the angle of the bricks to add some variety and interest in a monochromatic design and get the bricks in a more vertical fashion above the hearth area. So beginning at the top or bottom and kind of working in and around, you can either outline them first and fill them in a little bit, allowing your brush to run out of paint, or you can just fill them in, leaving still a little bit of highlight and white space where possible. The upper mantle is going to be a lighter wash, kind of like the middle mantle. So more water in your paint, a little bit more transparent, and apply on the one side, left side in this case, and continue to wipe the brush. You can even rinse and wipe, or in this case, Naya's added more water and pull that shadow over in towards the middle. The more water, the more transparent. Again, she's airplaning off the surface so that she creates thinner lines and just kind of leaving it open and sketchy in this area. You can add additional shading wet on wet. You could also let this dry and add additional shading afterward. That shading is primarily at the top portion to kind of define it. And this is where that second hearth layer is dry, so you could also come in and add more detail there. It's time to paint the little log area there. And in this case, it's such a monochromatic design that one of the really important things you're going to do is paint in the direction of the different elements. So you can notice that she's altered the direction of how she's blocking in those little logs there. If you wanted, in this case, what I might have done is added a little bit of burnt sienna to the mix, just to make them a little bit warmer in tone, but you could totally just leave them the same burnt umber color as she's done here, both beautiful. It's just going to be very monochromatic. And she's moving her brush in the front tips of the log in a circular fashion, and she's moving her brush horizontally or parallel to the shape of the logs when she's filling in the top of them. That's really going to give you a little bit of a difference between the other monochromatic areas of the design. You can shade wet on wet. You could also wait for this to dry essentially and shade after the fact. You'll notice she's not adding a lot of Payne's Gray to tint this, so it is a little bit warmer than if she had added some Payne's Gray to it, which is going to dull it down a little bit, even though it's still a burnt umber color. One of the most important things you can do, even with inanimate objects, is to follow what I'm going to just term in air quotes here as growth direction. So when we look at fabric, there's a weave to it. When we look at wood, there's a grain to it. So when we talk about growth direction or directional blending, it's following kind of that natural curve or movement or growth direction, we would call it. So whether it's fabric, it's wood, or it's something that's actually currently still alive, like a little critter or a flower, you're going to want to make sure that you're always kind of paying attention to how that item is formed or created. Let me get inside the hearth here with some burnt umber. You feel free to add little touches of Payne's gray as you go. We're just getting a little bit of color at the top of the hearth and down each side with that burnt umber, and you can add burnt umber plus a touch of Payne's gray to shade if you want. Keep it nice and soft. A lot of people think that in an area like that it's going to be super, super dark, but because the rest of the item is fairly dark with all the bricks around it, you need to add some contrast. And sometimes we add contrast by using the opposite of dark, which is light, which kind of keeps things nice and airy. And then if you want to darken it later, once you're done everything else, you're welcome to kind of decide to deepen that. But leave yourself a little bit of space and room to play around and see how the flames shape up. The other reason is you're painting flames. If you already have dark color in and around and behind them, it's going to be really hard to have the freedom that you need to make the flames the shape that you want. So leaving that white space is important, especially if you're going to begin to paint lighter color around it. So we've switched water here. This is important. So clean water, because we had a lot of brown and we're about to paint those flames with a little bit of yellow. So you're going to put the yellow at the base, wipe the brush, and work that yellow upward. You can allow it to pool to leave a variety of different yellow tones, or you can make it nice and smooth. Doesn't matter either way, just kind of enjoy ensuring that you have a nice flicker on the tips of those flames. Now we're going to pick up a bit of orange, which is a Cad Red Pale, plus a little bit of yellow, and kind of drop that into the bottom, allowing it to work up, and we can help it along if we want. And then you can add just a bit of the Cad Reddish tones just at the very base of the bottom to make sure that you have that bright glow. We're going to work those colors upward. You can kind of add some little fiddly bits around it to make the flames kind of flicker, separating the base of the flame and the entire fire by adding some little dots or dashes above and around it so that it looks like there's a little bit of space between the flames. Now, a couple things. If you're going to paint the little bits of wood underneath and you hit the red, there's the risk of them kind of merging or blurring together. If you feel confident that you can kind of get the division between the two successfully, or you don't mind if they blur together a little bit, you can go ahead and work wet on wet. If you're a little bit worried that red and that burnt umber tone or series of tones is going to blend or mix together or merge a bit, you can also wait till the fire is dry. I'm a little bit impatient, and I can see here Naya wanted to get those little bits of wood underneath on right away. So it's totally okay to proceed. It's also okay to take a quick coffee break and come back to it. So she's got her burnt umber tones, and she's starting on either side of the logs and bringing that color in towards the center. It's time to move on to some greenery and our wreath. So there's many different greens that you can use, and we always encourage you to use what you have on hand. In this case, whether it's Sap Green or Viridian, or you mix yourself a really beautiful green, you want to make sure that you have somewhere kind of in the middle as far as opacity is concerned, so that you have a nice, rich, beautiful green. And in this case, as opposed to doing many, many different layers, she's putting that color on and leaving white space in between to look like little highlights on those leaves on the wreath. That makes sure that the wreath is not too washed out. So oftentimes artists such as myself will do 3 or 4 layers on a wreath to build it up. Naya is a higher contrast painter, so quite often on that first layer, she's establishing quite a bit of that depth and dimension and filling those in fairly solidly. The little flickers of white space are quite dramatic looking and really, really beautiful. So make sure you leave those bits of white space, leave more than you think you need. Then what you can do is you can always fill them in later on. I would let the wreath dry and then come in with a little bit of that burnt umber tone and fill inside of it where the bricks would be behind it. Again, we left that space open just to kind of allow the green to land where it wanted to land. Then we can always fill in the other color behind it or within it. You can now take a little bit of your warm red. So whether you're using a Cad Red Pale or a Cad Red, you're going to get a nice, rich, opaque bit of it on your brush. Load the brush fully, tap off the excess, make sure you don't have too much paint, but we also want to get nice little drops of red for berries on our wreath. We want to get a little bit of color into the base of the hearth here. So we're going to take that same burnt umber tone, begin with dark at the left side here by applying fairly full strength color, rinse the brush, blot on paper towel, and begin to drag it over to the right. And again, she's doing a lot of airplaning where she lifts the pressure of the brush as she's going to make sure she gets a nice fine edge and she gets a reduction in the opacity of the color that's going on there. And then you can start on the right hand side and drag it over. We want to make sure we ground our little set of logs and the base of the fire with a little bit of that same tone, so we're building layers there. And little bits of Payne's gray with burnt umber in here is desired to kind of make sure that you have a different type of shadow tone. Then what we're going to do now, rinse the brush, and you can continue to kind of fill in a little bit more tone behind that fire now. You want to make sure that yellow is fully dry just in case you accidentally hit it. But just to break up that white, just a wee bit. We're going to take a little bit of our yellow here and we're going to paint a bit of a glow on the base of the hearth there. The reason why is to show essentially that that bright, vibrant flame is flickering and it's kind of glinting and pushing forward some reflected color onto the hearth. Brings a little more warmth into the design and kind of makes it look a little more alive. Take a little bit of Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber or Payne's Gray to create the lantern. We're just washing just a tiny hint of that color into the inside of the lantern just to make it look like glass is there. And just a tiny, tiny touch of yellow to show a glow, filling in a little bit of the inside. Really beautiful, warm, cozy, heartwarming project for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.